The space that I'm most interested in is actually the space that I don't create, that's created by the two poles that I build. So you have the image and the text, and then the space between the two. The image is primarily meant to seduce, and then the text functions as the hardcore data. I really do try and keep my opinions or any sort of political slant outside of the work, and I don't want it to feel like there's some agenda at foot. After September 11th, when the American government and media was seeking the hidden and unknown beyond American borders, I wanted to look inward at what was hidden and inaccessible to the public within American borders and sort of integral parts of the country's foundation and mythology and daily functioning. The project's committed to creating this very disorienting experience when you go from one to the next. So it covers different chapter headings that I always had in my mind as I was identifying the sites I was going to go to. So it's government, security, science, entertainment, and you can never quite get your footing. And I wanted it to feel very awkward as you're jumping from one to the next. Many of the sites required kind of months or even years in some instances to gain access. The complete project took me 5 years, but so much of that time, I would say 20% of my time is spent actually photographing, and 80% of my time is spent researching and writing letters, phone calling, emailing, just trying to access these sites, and also researching to identify which sites I want to go to. I spent a long time, nearly a year, trying to find a woman who was receiving hymenoplasty, which is a surgical procedure that restores the virginal state, and I ended up accessing a Palestinian woman who was getting the surgery which basically restores the hymen and allows her to bleed upon first sex to adhere to cultural standards regarding virginity and marriage. And I photographed the entire surgery. In the end, I decided that not showing the graphic specifics of the surgery was stronger. That was a good example of where I got lost in the aesthetics of the picture, because I always have to think conceptually and then aesthetically, so I'm trying to make a seductive image first and foremost. I often intervene in the photograph. I'm not committed to photographing precisely what's before me. And we were in a bio-level lab with the live virus, and I was supposed to have gloves on and be very careful and not be touching the virus, and I wanted the shadow to go a certain way and the light to hit the right corner of the bottle, and I just forgot what I was doing, and I took my gloves off and started moving the virus, and it all came out of me. A division of the Library of Congress produces several publications in Braille, and it's federally funded, and the publications they choose to publish are based on readership, popularity, and numbers, and Playboy is always within the top 10. The cables, when I first got there, that was something that I had imagined in my mind. I was planning on scuba diving, and I had imagined the cables kind of coming up out of the water and getting that moment when they come out from under the sea. But that's not how it happens, I later learned. And so they come up into manholes, and I went and looked at the manholes, and then went up a couple levels, and I ended up in this room that I thought was a complete failure when I took the picture, because it's very banal. And only with time did I kind of come to appreciate the humor in it, because these cables with this pathetic guardrail around them that carry over 60 million simultaneous voice conversations just felt like they could be snipped so easily. That was something I wanted to actually see, because it's something I had always considered for myself. Again, when you go and look at this, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, and if they can't pay the rent one month, or if there's a blackout, or I just started seeing all these things, what happens? And, again, the cracks in the system. This one was pretty complicated. This was a nuclear waste encapsulation and storage facility in Washington State, and it's one of the most contaminated sites in the United States. And there's over 1,900 steel capsules containing nuclear waste submerged in water. And if the water weren't there, a human would die within seconds. And I spent time looking around them and trying to get the frame that I was going to take, and then I saw this one section that really did look exactly like a map of the United States. So that became, a lucky find. And I had to stand above these capsules photographing. It was a long exposure, so I was there for hours alone with this blue glow, and they had given me a radiometer to read my radiation levels and to just sit in silence with this. It's called Cherenkov radiation, that blue glow. That's actually the waste literally emanating through a very thick steel capsule. It does make you feel small. The Innocence, which was my first series documenting cases of wrongful conviction throughout America, investigates photography's role in the process of misidentifications, which are the leading cause of wrongful convictions in America. This often happens through a witness's response to photo lineups, and what can happen through a manipulative effort on law enforcement's part, or just accidentally. A witness can gain familiarity with something she's presented with again and again, and suddenly that photograph could replace the actual memory if there ever was one. So it was this very focused site in which you could see the power of a photograph taken out of its initial context or without a specific context, and how it could take on a whole nother history that is in fact a complete lie. Photography is a prostitute, and it's used by so many different people and agendas. After that project, that was when I really became extremely attached to this idea of a photograph being accompanied with a text, and admitting, recognizing, and declaring this relationship between a photograph and its context as an integral part of the viewing process. The text is actually always presented very small next to the image, so you can't engage with both of them at the same time. And you come to the image and it's a space of multiple truths, and then you go to the text and it kind of takes all of your fantasies and nails it to the ground and completely defines what you're looking at, and you return to the image and it has a whole new identity, and then you return to the text and the text becomes something different, and this play back and forth becomes a bit of a performance. The thing I came away with, which I think happens in any area when you try and actually dig in behind facades and red tape, is that it often was more vulnerable than I imagined on the other side. And in terms of government sites, a lot of things just felt like they were locked in the Cold War era, and things hadn't necessarily evolved. A lot of the images look like they could have been taken decades ago. The thing that is American about the project is that I was able to access a lot of these sites. I can think of several other countries that I've worked in where that would not be possible at all. I would wonder what the appearance of absolute transparency would be. I can't imagine what form that would take, and if it's even possible. This was sort of an attempt to see the center with my own eyes, but what you come away with is just the confirmation that you can't necessarily get to the center, and who knows if there is a center. And a photograph is always just another distance from which to see something. This one was far closer than most.